Welcome to The Poisoning, a podcast by Agence France Presse. Episode 2, Novichok. My name is Andrea Palasciano.
And I'm Jonathan Brown. We're journalists working for the global news agency AFP in Moscow.
The voice you're about to hear is not Alexei Navalny, the main character of our podcast and Russia's foremost opposition figure. But it's someone who's lived through a similar experience, and his story is going to help us understand what happened to Alexei Navalny.
I suddenly felt that I was unable to breathe anymore. I was unable to take in the air, and I have to say it's both painful and terrifying at the same time. And I didn't understand what was happening, and then I felt that my heart began to race. My blood pressure dropped. I began to sweat profusely. I began to vomit. My colleagues, called an ambulance, took me to the hospital, and they couldn't work out what was happening because one organ was giving up after another. My name is Vladimir Kara-Murza. I'm a Russian opposition politician. Perhaps dissident is a more appropriate term, given the political system that we have.
Kara-Murza experienced these symptoms in 2015. Here he is again, describing what he thinks happened.
And they were shuffling me from hospital to hospital. And finally, on the third day, I was taken to the Pirogov Hospital number 1 here in Moscow, where the doctor in whose care I was put, an intensive care specialist by the name of Dr. Denis Protsenko, looked at what was happening and said, this is not a heart problem or a lung problem or a stomach problem or a liver problem, because this is what they used to think, because one organ would shut down after the other. He said it is a complex problem. It was he who gave me this diagnosis, toxic action by an unidentified substance, which translated from medical speak into plain human language means poisoning. All of my organs had given up. It was a multiple organ failure. I was in a coma. I was on artificial life support, apparently looking like an octopus because there were so many wires and cables sticking around. And doctors were telling my wife that I had a 5% chance to live. So no words can express how grateful and fortunate I feel to be able to even sit here and speak with you today.
2 years later, Kara-Murza told me he experienced poisoning symptoms again.
It is extremely painful and terrifying to be dying, because this is what you feel. When this happens, you feel like you're dying. When this happened to me, I was absolutely certain that this was the end.
Kara-Murza is one name among a growing list of Russian activists, journalists, and politicians who have described falling suddenly and mysteriously ill. The latest name to be added to that list, Alexei Navalny.
On August 20, 2020, Navalny was flying home from Tomsk, a city in Siberia surrounded by thousands of kilometers of forests. Around 20 minutes after takeoff, Navalny started feeling unwell. He began howling in pain and collapsed. What had started as a routine work trip ended in a medical emergency, a media frenzy, and a geopolitical standoff, with the West accusing Russia of a state-sponsored poisoning attack.
And Tomsk, the sleepy university town in Siberia, became the center of attention. So we went there to retrace Navalny's steps and paint a picture of what happened. We stayed at the same hotel he did.
So we're here outside the Xander Hotel in Tomsk. The hotel itself is set back in a pleasant, leafy courtyard just off the main street. And we're surrounded by kind of unremarkable wooden homes that are native to Siberia, you could say.
Yeah, this is the last place that Navalny was free and conscious before he collapsed on the plane. In the immediate aftermath, there was a lot of speculation around what Navalny ate and drank in Tomsk. Could that offer a clue? Okay, let's go in.
Ksenya Fadeeva was then the head of Navalny's regional office. At the time, she was running for city council. On August 19, she showed Navalny a local swimming spot and afterwards went with him to the hotel restaurant. It's a place that became infamous for its cocktails. We met her in the same hotel where she recounted what Navalny ordered.
We came back in the evening after the swim. We went to his hotel and went down to the restaurant where other people from his anti-corruption foundation were having a bite. And Navalny ordered a cocktail, a Bloody Mary or a Negroni. He didn't like it, and we left. That's it.
Navalny ordered a Bloody Mary, but they didn't have the ingredients. So he went for a Negroni instead. He could only stomach one sip, and later there was speculation that the drink was tainted.
Negroni? Yes.
We tried it too, at the same bar, and it wasn't good. After 11 p.m., Navalny went back to his room, packed his bags, and went to sleep before his flight early the next morning.
About 20 minutes after takeoff, Mr. Navalny said what was happening to him felt like a river of sweat running down his forehead. He felt something beyond pain. He felt something very unfamiliar coming over him. At least that's how he described it to me.
This is Agnes Callamard. She's currently Secretary General of Amnesty International. Before that, she was tasked by the United Nations to lead an investigation into what happened to Navalny. She spoke with him while he was recovering.
So he asked to get out to go to the restroom to wash his face. So that's what he did. He washed his face. He stayed in the bathroom for probably about 10 minutes before leaving. When we spoke about it, he described his experience in the bathroom as if someone was trying to kill him. He truly felt like life was leaving him.
Was it that bad cocktail? Or was it something else he had before flying? We know from Callamard's report that he also had sushi, water, and tea.
But her investigation drew another conclusion.
Il semblerait que l'empoisonnement ait été un empoisonnement par la peau.
It looks like the poisoning was a poisoning through the skin. It wasn't something he ate. It wasn't something he breathed in. Rather, it seems to be something that was maybe placed on his pants and would have entered Mr. Navalny's body by contact through the skin.
Analysis from labs in France, Germany, and Sweden concluded that the substance Navalny came into contact with was a form of Novichok, a Soviet-designed military toxin. That finding was confirmed by the global watchdog, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Evidence would later surface that the poison was placed on the lining of Navalny's underwear, a detail that sparked viral memes.
What we know is that this is a very delicate poison. You could easily, quickly poison an entire town with it. I think it's important to note that this is a chemical weapon. We say poison, but Novichok is a chemical weapon.
But who has access to this substance?
You might remember Novichok from another scandal. In 2018, the city of Salisbury in the UK made headlines when Russian double agent Sergei Skripal was found poisoned there with his daughter. Experts concluded that they had been dosed with Novichok. The British Prime Minister at the time, Theresa May, had a clear idea of who the culprit was.
Now, Russia staged a brazen and reckless attack against the United Kingdom when it attempted the murder of 2 people on the streets of Salisbury.
Both Skripal and his daughter survived, but another bypasser who came in contact with the poison died. The incident sparked sanctions, and the West expelled dozens of Russian diplomats in response. Russia's foreign minister denied the allegations and said the UK had not provided, and I quote, any single piece of concrete evidence.
There is a link between what happened to Skripal and to Navalny. Or so says the online investigation group Bellingcat. When they dug into Skripal's poisoning, they said they found a lab in Russia that makes Novichok. They dug deeper, and their trail led back to Russia's security services, which, Bellingcat says, carried out the poisoning.
Then, when Navalny was poisoned, Bellingcat found that the same lab was implicated. It started with phone calls between this lab and Tomsk. Here's Aric Toler, one of Bellingcat's investigators.
Right before the poisoning, we saw this huge flurry of phone traffic, including some calls out to Tomsk, which was the city where Navalny was poisoned. And so that kind of gave us a little signal like, oh, wait, there may actually be something going on here, because the same scientists, they were talking to some people right before and after the Navalny poisoning as well. So that kind of was a red flag for us that they could have been involved.
That red flag was enough for Bellingcat to dig deeper into Russia's security services, the FSB and the GRU, and their possible role in Navalny's poisoning.
So a lot of times we find these things out because of, really stupid things these guys do. I mean, for example, one of the ways that we can find as much as we have is because the FSB and GRU both, whenever they book tickets for their officers, so like let's say that you're going to have a plane ride, you're going to go do a mission and poison some guy in Tomsk, right? Navalny, right? Well, they're very kind to us and they buy them in group operations. So this makes it really, really easy sometimes to track these spies because they literally check in together at the airport. So we can, if you're traveling with somebody, usually it's families, right? Wife, husband, or the kids, whatever, usually they check in together. But a lot of times when we see these, 2 45-year-old guys who check in together and we're looking into a case, well, that kind of makes it a lot easier to find them. Are they business travelers, or are they brothers, or are they poisoners together? It makes it a lot easier.
Bellingcat cross-referenced data they sourced online about the identities and travel patterns of alleged FSB agents. And they reportedly uncovered 8 operatives who tailed Navalny 30 times. 3 of these men, they said, were near Navalny around the time of his poisoning.
On the back of Bellingcat's report, Navalny set up a call with one of these 3 men. He pretended to be a senior Russian security official, and he demanded to know why his own poisoning had gone wrong. He put the call on YouTube. The video has been watched millions of times.
About 12 minutes in, Navalny asks why the operation failed.
Почему провал-то? Что нужно сделать в будущем, чтобы ничего этого не было?
The agent on the phone says the odds were stacked against the team, and that if the plane hadn't made the emergency landing, the story could have ended differently. In other words, Navalny could have died.
The pilot's decision to make an emergency landing, it clearly saved Alexei's life, because if the pilot had decided to continue to Moscow, he would have died on the plane.
Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, dismissed the accusations. He said the fact that the plane made the emergency landing and that Navalny received immediate care showed Russia had, quote, nothing to hide. But Agnes Callamard says that given the use of Novichok, it's hard to believe that anyone but a state could be responsible. Here's her main hypothesis.
Le gouvernement de Russie
The Russian government organized, planned, and carried out Mr. Navalny's poisoning and his attempted murder. Novichok is a poison, a chemical weapon, that is only used by Russia. It was used by the Soviet Union, and Russia continued to use it. According to us, those who are able to use Novichok are working on behalf of the Russian government.
This was also Kara-Murza's belief. You remember him from the beginning of this episode describing his symptoms.
This is the reality of Vladimir Putin's Russia. There is a professional squad of assassins in the employment of the state whose job it is to physically eliminate political opponents of the regime. We had this in Stalin's time. We also had this in later Soviet times. There were infamous cases of KGB poisonings in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And again, since Vladimir Putin came to power, he has reinstated that practice. And there's a growing number of Kremlin opponents who have suffered this fate.
Putin himself addressed Navalny's poisoning at his annual press conference in December 2020. He said Navalny was working with foreign intelligence and that if Russia really was involved in the attack, the outcome would have been different. Navalny at the time was recovering in Germany.
This patient in the Berlin clinic has the support of the secret services, in this case of the US. And if it's true, then it's interesting. In that case, the Russian secret services should of course keep an eye on him. But that doesn't mean at all that he needs to be poisoned. Who needs him? If they'd really wanted to, they probably would have carried it out to the end. When his wife turned to me, I immediately gave the order to let him go to Germany for treatment, at that very second.
On August 22nd, Navalny was flown to Germany. Thibault Marchand is a journalist for AFP. He was at the airport when Navalny's plane took off for Berlin.
I think when the plane took off, I had no clue. I had no idea. And I think nobody knew what would happen to Alexei Navalny. Would he survive? Would he die?
Navalny detailed his slow recovery in Germany on his blog and Instagram. His family gathered around him. The scandal died down. He got better. The story could have ended there. He could have lived out an uneventful life in exile. But 5 months later, he booked a flight home.
Thank you for listening to AFP's long-form podcast, The Poisoning. We hope you enjoyed the episode. If you liked it, tell your friends and rate it wherever you're listening. For more from AFP, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. From Moscow, I'm Andrea Palasciano.
And I'm Jonathan Brown. See you in episode 3.